Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. There's been a discussion, a debate in the House of Lords, and it has significant ramifications for Scotland because they're looking to change some of the terms in the Scotland Act 1998 in basically saying what the SNP government or any subsequent government can do within the terms of that act. And this is quite important because it would stop them spending on matters outside of reserved matters. And thus, those pretendy embassies, for example, would have to go because Scotland does not have foreign policy. That's an example. And it would impose sanctions on any leader personally if he allowed these things to go through. Sanctions on the leader, sanctions on the party. So if they broke the rules, they broke the spending rules, it would be down to both John Swinney and the SNP. They'd both be accountable with possible jail sentences. This is fantastic news. It means that they can deal only with what those matters that are, devolved. They cannot deal with reserved matters. They cannot speak for energy. They cannot speak for defence. They cannot speak for foreign policy. And such. And they would be unable, and it would be illegal to spend taxpayers' cash on any of these things. This, I think, is a remarkable move forward. Now, I mentioned in an earlier video about plans to try to extend parliamentary privilege, to the floor of the Senate, Holyrood as well. And I think that's a good thing. And I think also in the Senate and also in Stormont in Northern Ireland, I think they should all have privilege for that so that it can help the truth to come out. It will be an aid to democracy where people can speak freely and without fear of legal ramifications. And I think that's an excellent one. John Swinney has confirmed that he wants to continue to break up the UK. That is the SNP's raison d'etre after all. Even though the country has overwhelmingly abandoned the Nats, let's face it, that last election was an absolute drubbing. And indeed, to be fair, what's his name? Stephen Flynn at PMQs on Wednesday did make light of the fact that there were so few of them. He laughed about, how well Labour have done in massively reducing the numbers of Tory MPs, then looked around himself at the 9 or the 8 others that were there. And said the only problem now is, of course, we are uncomfortably close to them, obviously sitting on the same bench. And I felt fair enough. He's making light. It's obviously embarrassing for him, but he's laughing it off, and that's fair enough. I'm not going to castigate him for that. But it would limit and clip their wings. And that, I think, is very important because I think having been in power so long, having had that period where they had that majority, they got very arrogant. They got very conceited. They started assuming powers that they didn't have, and then we're forced to draw it back. And these are the sort of things that need to be controlled because they're spending money on them. They're spending money on these things where they should be spending money on things that they need to spend it on. Health, education, social care, that sort of thing. Rather than wanking millions away on foreign embassies, on spin doctors, on all the things they don't need to be spending. And Lord Foulkes is, of course, leading. He's a champion on this one. We've covered him many times on the channel. He's pushing this. He's saying that this needs to be controlled and curtailed, and that they basically need to be reminded of of the limits of their power, the limits of their authority. He said, and it started under Sturgeon, who just assumed that being the First Minister gave her, almost demigod powers and that she could do the things she wanted to do. Unfortunately, of course, she was proved right. Nobody was prepared to stand up. But it's one of these things. They must only stick to devolved matters. They must not touch reserved matters. And they must have oversight from Westminster of all spending in Scotland to ensure that the spending they're doing is legal, is fair, is beneficial, and is not done on party political basis. No, they'd never get away with spending money on party politics when it should be government money on government issues, which, of course, the SNP have undoubtedly been guilty of. It's very simple to change this legislation. The SNP would hate it, but if Labour would back it, of course, because Labour would be the next power in Scotland. So you'd have a Labour government in Scotland, a Labour government Westminster, working hand in hand, you'd imagine. And so, yes, if they time it right, they can do the legislation, and then that would be there, that would be controlled, and there would be, going forward, no way the SNP could destroy Scotland again. Not that I ever think the SNP will ever be in power again. I think they're a busted flush, and it's time to flush them down the toilet. It is basically a party of turds, and one could happily wipe them out. Sweet. But Lord Offord, another one, he said, and I'm going to quote him here, because he said, the sad reality is that in the 17 years under an SNP government, every single KPI in devolved matters in Scotland has gone backwards. Our education system, once the gold-plated education system in the United Kingdom, which allowed me to go from a tenement to this place, talking about the House of Lords, says has been completely reduced from outstanding to below average. He says police numbers are now at a 15-year low, and let's not even talk about the A9, the single-track railways, or the ferries and lack thereof. He says on health, 1 in 7 Scots is currently on a waiting list, and local authorities are being denuded. He says, I take this opportunity to urge the new government to take a fresh look and review the 25 years of devolution. Some good things have been achieved, but some bad things too, and we must now take the opportunity to ensure the Scottish Government gets focused on doing the day job of running the country. Well said, Lord Offord. Well said. You've summed it up there quite accurately, I think. Force them to do their day job. Ban them from exploding outwards into areas over which they have no authority, no responsibility, no competence. Although they've got no competence at just about anything, have they? But there must be massive controlled oversight. And yes, I do propose that this final, yes, sure, you can have this. Basically, we've got to put it back into the minds of people that the Scottish Government at Holyrood is little more than a glorified council. It's not sovereign. It has no rights. It has no abilities. It does not exist on the world stage. It is a regional government. I personally believe there should be an English government. You have a Welsh and a Northern Irish and a Scottish. I believe there should be an English government. And I think it should federalise. So certain laws, all of them, individually, you create your own laws. I think that would be fine. And wouldn't need to go to the expense. You could have the English government in Parliament. You just have English government days, and then you have national government days. Not a problem. But it's got to be controlled. There's got to be limits. And the SNP need to know their place. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope that's put some thoughts in your head. Let me know what you think, and we will speak later. Bye.